Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Caribbean Masterclasses. Welcome again. I am so excited to have you all. If you're in the Cayman Islands, a bit of a rainy Tuesday evening, but regardless of where you are, I know that you're excited to meet our guest this evening, our star in November, as we focus on great, interesting, dynamic personalities within our region and hear their stories so we are inspired to live our bigger, better lives. And of course, my guest is Daphne Ewing-Chow, and she is a senior contributor for Forbes.com. But she has a special focus on food and agriculture with a commute between Barbados and the Cayman Islands. Daphne loves stories of sustainable and regenerative growth through food systems and agriculture. And she's headed up two communication projects at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and she's served as the communications advisor at the World Food Program's Caribbean headquarters. What I love is that she also has contributed to other well-known medium and publications, including the Sunday Times of London, the New York Times, and the International Monetary Fund's, their Finance and Development magazine. She was a finalist of the Island Voices Journalism Competition in 2019, and she won an award for celebrating responsible coverage of mental health and psychosocial support during COVID-19, and that was this year. She served as a food sustainability judge for the Zayed, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Sustainability Prize in the United Arab Emirates. And that was in 2019 and 2021. And she's also served as a judge for the Rockefeller Foundation's 2 Million Food System Vision Prize. And that happened in 2020. So give a warm Caribbean masterclass for our star this evening, Daphne Ewing-Chow. Hello, hello, hello. Good night. How are you? Welcome. Can you hear us? Yeah, here we go. We can hear you. Are you there? Uh-oh.
Anik, I'm not seeing you or hearing you.
Uh-oh. Let's try this one more time. So here we go. All right. What about now? We can see you. Can you hear us? All right. So I'm going to ask my studio guest, can you see Daphne? If you can put that in the chat, just let us know. Uh-oh. All right. So give us a minute. We just have a bit of technical difficulty. So she's going to try to sign on again, and hopefully we can connect her.
Yes.
Yay!
I don't know what just happened.
I know. It's called technology, and it happens. It's like you and I had a great time.
I know.
We were sitting waiting for our audience, and showtime starts, and Murphy's Law.
Yeah, but exactly.
Welcome. I hope you saw or heard your wonderful introduction.
I did. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good. And the audience is confirming they can see you and they can hear you.
Beautiful. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Welcome again. We're
glad. Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
Now, you are a senior contributor for Forbes.com. Now, yes. I don't know how familiar the audience is with this particular entity, but it's an American-based media company, and it focuses on business, investment, technology, leadership, lifestyle. but it's also known because of its lists and rankings that include, some of the world's top companies, the richest Americans, and so forth. And they also manage an up-to-date website that allows advertisers to push blog posts through with regular editorial content. And it allows for contributors worldwide to write and publish articles directly to the site. So, how did you actually start that journey with Forbes.com to be able to start contributing to it?
Okay, well, I guess what I would say to that is what I hope, if there's anything that anybody takes away from our discussion, is through being authentic, basically. So I've wanted to be a journalist my whole life. Grew up in Barbados, and I don't know if other people in the audience would agree. I don't know if you would agree with me, Anik, but I find in the Caribbean, we tend to promote disciplines like sciences and math and law and becoming a doctor a lot more than stuff like journalism or the arts. And I always was very fond of writing. I wanted to be a journalist, but I felt like it might have not been like the appropriate profession, what my parents would have wanted me to do,
Right.
what my society would have wanted me to do. So it actually took me a while to get here. I did my master's in international economics at Columbia University and immediately got into banking after I graduated. And I just started writing in the same time while in a profession I wasn't crazy about. And I started doing what I loved, which was writing and writing about the environment. And, doors opened for me through that. People were seeing my writing, and someone at the Food and Agriculture Organization, if you're watching, Iris, and talking about you, asked me if I would come on and manage communications for a climate change project that she headed up. And I was doing articles for her in addition to the other articles I was doing. And I don't know, somehow the algorithm on LinkedIn, it connected me with the business editor at Forbes. He went to Columbia as well. And he saw one of my articles that I had written about food and climate change. And he reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in writing for Forbes. So it wasn't actually one of those stories where I went looking for it. But obviously super thrilled when I was asked to do it.
So it was an opportunity that found you.
Yes, absolutely. And I also have to say, and this might come up again, but I wasn't sure about how I was going to do, because coming into this arena, I knew that my passion was the Caribbean and I was going to be writing about the Caribbean. And I had no idea, being the only writer on Forbes who focused really most of her writing on the Caribbean, what kind of audience I was going to get. And I was worried that, you never know, people might not be interested. But it turned out within a year, I became a senior contributor. And that's the top 3% of performers.
Ooh, so you see, you started off on a bang already, ma'am. First of all, reminding us about being authentic. Their comments, I love the audience. They're very interactive and they're sharing their comments and feedback. And the fact that people are saying, yeah, that's the truth. Where in the Caribbean, we keep pushing and focusing on very specific career paths. And we truly need to embrace the arts. We truly need to embrace journalism and the opportunities there. And you didn't even have to go searching for that opportunity. It was an alignment for you. And that's why I love the fact that, people who are on LinkedIn, that really can connect. When we talk about networking, LinkedIn sounds like it's a great avenue. It worked for you in terms of connection, but I also like that you were being very bold, focusing on the Caribbean and being a trailblazer, because as you said, nobody else was writing about the Caribbean in that platform. And that's why we looked at this particular theme, how we show up in terms of as a region on an international stage. So in your bio, of course, and your focus is food and agriculture. And you and I talked about those topics because one is kind of seen as very sexy. Chefs are rock
Oh
stars,
yeah,
when they talk about food. But agriculture, especially in our region, oh, we don't like that. It's almost like something,
taboo.
yes, our history says no, 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 no.
Right.
And so I am curious as to why you chose those two areas, food and agriculture, to showcase the Caribbean.
So I would say to start off, they kind of picked me
Mm,
because so I was really passionate about the environment. And as I mentioned, I was doing these articles, and then this person at the Food and Agriculture Organization brought me on, and I started writing about food for the first time ever.
mm,
And I absolutely loved it. And that's how the food picked me. But I've always been incredibly passionate about Caribbean issues. And I
mm,
honestly believe from the bottom of my soul that one of our biggest issues is related to food.
mm,
And the reason for that is the vast majority of the food that we consume as a people is actually not from home at all. It is
mm,
imported from the United States. And when you really look at the fact that food is such a huge part of your identity,
mm,
and the fact that you are putting that in the hands of somebody else,
mm,
it's very symbolic. So, in a very big way, part of my mission is to convert people to the beauty of Caribbean food and Caribbean local food,
yes.
which you can't have without agriculture,
Mm,
local agriculture. Not only is it tastier, but it's also more nutritious when it's grown locally.
mhm.
And that lifts us up, that raises our confidence as a people because food is such a big part of who we are.
Yeah. And it is so fascinating when you talk about agriculture too, because uh, I did a master class with the economist, Marla Ducaran out of Trinidad. She also lives in Barbados.
Yeah,
And
she's lovely.
she really is. And we had a question posed to her, you know, because we were talking about tourism. This was coming out of the pandemic, the impact that we're feeling in the Caribbean, where tourism is concerned, et cetera. And we said, okay, what do you think the future is for the Caribbean when we look at economies and industries where we're looking at? She mentioned renewable energy, which is, of course, very topical now from an environmental standpoint. But then she said agriculture. And that it was very fascinating to me. She says, we have a historic aversion to agriculture, but she talked about the fact that modern agriculture, there's a place for that for us within the Caribbean to be part of that. Look at that as an industry. And she used the Netherlands as an example of how they've made modern agriculture work. So I'm really happy, that there are voices out there like yours that's highlighting this is an important industry. So you talked about um, showcasing, standing out there, as you will, kind of on your own, showcasing the region to the rest of the world. And the fact that within a year you were among the top three in terms of the responses. So, what is it that the international audience loves when they to know about the Caribbean? When you write, what resonates with the international audience?
I'll tell you. And luckily, on Forbes, the contributors get like a dashboard. And so
Hmm.
you could see which of your articles are most enjoyed and who's tapping into your articles. And as time has gone on, this is my third year now. Obviously, I don't just write about the Caribbean anymore. I write about all kinds of things pertaining to food. But my top 5 articles on Forbes are all articles very much about the Caribbean. My top article is an article that I wrote about Cayman, which was how Cayman responded to the pandemic in the beginning. And that was driven by an immense amount of pride, because no matter how much we were all struggling, we really held it together and outperformed the world over here. And my second most popular article is an article about the Maroons of Jamaica.
Oh, wow.
Another source of immense pride. I mean, their story is something that we should be so proud of. You know, they're one of our indigenous populations, and they are one of the only like sovereign nations in the Caribbean. How cool is that? That's so amazing. And obviously I got very passionate about it. I think my third most popular article is about Shelly Ann Fraser Price, who is one of the best sprinters in history, one of the top three in history. And these are Caribbean born, bred, authentic stories. And I realized that I was bringing something to that table at Forbes that no one else could bring, because no one had that kind of passion for these kinds of stories.
So it's amazing. So you showed up and you show up passionate about how you represent this region. And one of the things that's always fascinating to me when I do these master classes is the fact that, people like yourself who find an opportunity on platforms like this, Forbes.com, that you represent an entire region and you do it with passion and pride. And we're showcased so well. And, I was going to ask you how you show up when you were writing, but I can hear that already when you talked about your stories. Yeah. And I agree. We have a comment here from Sharon Banfield about your passion and insights. And I love that. And, I have a question for you already coming out from the audience. And this is from Powder Monkey Gourmet Treats. Do you think that our lack of historical knowledge of African cuisine hampers our ability to fully embrace or connect our food? So when you're talking about your food stories, talk to us about that.
So I do have a feeling of that a little bit. Like when I tell my food stories, I feel a very strong need to take them back to Africa, because how could you not? And it makes it so much more colorful and beautiful when you can trace back, okay, well, this part of this meal came from here. Because some of our meals, actually, you'll see like all of these different connections coming together. So you will see the Chinese, you will see the Indian, you will see the African, you will see our European colonizers, and it all comes together, and it's so beautiful, and it makes it taste better.
Oh.
And yes, I do believe that if we had more knowledge about these things, the food would taste better. It does taste good already. I'm saying it would taste even better.
It really would.
Yeah.
Because now you have this full appreciation of what is happening with the food you eat and the connection, as in the question about that. And it reminds me.
I was just reaching over because I thought I had a book about African food that I constantly refer to when I write my food stories, but it was another book there. Sorry, I was going to show it to you all.
No,
sorry, I know that was random.
No. Well, I was wondering if somebody had popped in the room. I know how it is.
No.
Sometimes I'm like trying to write notes like, hey.
No, I thought it was that book, and I was like, nope, it's not.
No, only joking with you. But you say something that resonates deeply with me, because I was watching a Netflix show. I don't know if you watched this or anybody else in the audience has watched this, called High on the Hog. And
I've never seen it.
Yeah, High on the Hog is a Netflix show where the narrator, the gentleman, is trying to trace American cuisine and the connection with Africa. And it is the most beautiful story. I think it is actually based on a book. that was written by a food. She was a journalist. No, she is a journalist. She started with travel, and then she got into this whole connection with food. And they did this series. And when I hear you speaking about the Caribbean and the connection and bringing it even home to the fact that it's not just the African influence. You mentioned the Indian influence, the Chinese influence. It reminds us of just how much of a multi melting pot we are of people. It's almost like you're creating that storytelling. We have a comment from Sharon Banfield says that that's why in the tourism industry, we're encouraging culinary storytelling.
Yes, absolutely. And I think with COVID, that's really happening so much more. I think everybody is so much more proud of their own roots somehow coming out of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And talking about storytelling, what stories should we be telling? So I know you mentioned your top stories, and what was interesting to me is one was based on the Maroons, another was based on a track superstar, and obviously people are hungry for that type of information about our region. So when we show up, what are the stories we should be telling on an international stage?
So, first of all, what happens is we lack a platform in the region.
Mm,
And that's why people are so hungry, because we don't have a lot of platforms where our stories are being told.
mm,
And when they're being told, there's something that happens, which I have an issue with. We get lumped in with Latin America. So, they
mm,
say the Caribbean and Latin America, and they'll tell a story, and the story will be entirely about Latin America. Because, of
mm,
course, they're so much larger than us. And, they swallow us up in a lot of these stories. If you look at the publications put out by these international organizations, they'll say, oh, it's a study on the Caribbean, and you don't even see any Caribbean countries on the list, yet it's Latin America and the Caribbean. And
mhm,
it's highly frustrating. So it is our job as people who are proud of our heritage, when
mm,
you are standing on a global platform, whatever it may be, to tell your stories authentically and with pride. And if you
mm,
have that passion, you have that pride, it will come out in your words, no matter, whether it's through music or, theater or whatever your craft is.
mhm,
For me, I want to tell the stories of people who would not typically get their stories told.
mm,
So I look at women, I look at farmers. Like,
mhm.
when do you ever like read the story about a farmer?
Right.
They're highly marginalized oftentimes.
Mhm,
I want to tell as many stories about people of color as possible. So as much as possible, I will, on my headline image, it will be somebody of color, because that is the message I want to give out. This is
mm,
beautiful, this is powerful, this is strength. But then
mhm.
in addition to that,
Right.
I also want to talk about our issues, because
Mm,
we have a lot of issues.
mhm.
One of them being climate change.
Right.
And we are highly vulnerable, and it's not of our doing. It is the doing of countries that are much larger than us, and
Mhm,
they need to be aware of what they are doing to us.
mhm.
And that is why I am so in love with Prime Minister Mia Mottley, because
Yes.
she is
Yes.
unapologetic. She will go on that world stage and,
Mhm.
without using curse words, cuss out all the big countries for what they are doing to us. And
Yes.
that is, she is standing in her power. She knows who she is. She is proud of who she is. She is not trying to be someone she is not. And she is so loved by the world. I mean, I think she's going to go down in history as, one of the most loved leaders. She already is.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because the COP 26, that conference is finished, the United Climate Change Nations Climate Change Conference. Of course, if you didn't know Mia before, Prime Minister Mia Mottley before, I'm sure everybody saw that video that was circulating with her very impassioned plea, and even her interview with CNN, where she talked about the fact that, to your point, our region will disappear before some of the largest cities around the world. But it also speaks to something though. I love the comment from Georgina that we're a unique people with a very special history. But I also think that perhaps we are lacking the conversations even at regional level, because when we talk climate change, how many does the average person within the Caribbean region really understand what that threat looks like, what it means for us in a few years for some of our islands? I mean, you and I know about Cayman. We flat, 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 right? Maybe Cayman Brac has the bluff,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
what does that mean for us? So it almost seems too that an element of this storytelling has to happen even within our own region.
Absolutely. It has to start with our educational system. And actually, that's something else that's really important is our educational system, because in our schools, the primary thing that, at least in my day, I know things are changing. I'm an old lady now, but is
There you
kids
know.
kids are taught to be quiet, not to speak in class. You know, you get in trouble if you speak in class. And then I went to university in the States, and part of the grade was how much you spoke in class. And I
Mm,
thought, what? Like, I'm supposed to speak in class? Like in Barbados, I was taught, like, just be quiet and listen.
mm,
And as a result, I find like sometimes are afraid of our own voices. And to me,
mm,
that is a big thing that needs to change is we need to empower young people to not be afraid to have opinions and speak out, even if they are disagreeing with adults and
mhm,
teachers are not always right. That to
mhm,
me, it starts there. And then, of course, there's the education about our roots and the education about environmental issues and helping us to stand in our own shoes. Like even this climate change discussion, you know, we are being this issue that the whole region faces around being blacklisted by the EU, which of course both countries that, you know, I have one foot in and one foot in is Barbados and Cayman. Both of us struggle with this.
mhm,
And they're blacklisting us because they say that we're taking away their tax dollars. But what percentage of our GDP are they taking from us by what they're doing to us with climate change? But we don't
mhm.
have the power to blacklist them.
Right.
So nobody's
You know,
saying this.
again, when we talk about how we show up, you are right. It's the socialization, the education that needs to be addressed,
Yes.
especially for our young people to be able to have their voice and to show up properly. Because, a few years ago, we could have gotten away with certain things, but we have access to the world through technology and the internet and social media platforms, and we need to be presenting ourselves in a way that truly represents who we are. But that can only come when we understand our roots, as you say, and we are knowledgeable about what actually impacts us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a shout out there because you mentioned Georgina. Her name is Georgina Calendar. I'm pretty sure it's her.
Yes.
She has a great blog, by the way, and she's just put up her first blog post, and it was
Mhm.
fantastic. People should go out and follow her. And I mean, there's so many messages and lessons that could be learned from her start out, like beautiful imagery. Like
Mhm.
she got a professional photographer to do her photos. And her first blog post was about the Caribbean and how we should all embrace a unified identity. when we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to sell ourselves, as opposed to being insular within each of our own countries. And I thought it was fascinating, and just giving her props.
All right, so big up Georgina Calendar, and you can put your blog information definitely in the chat, because one of the things about these master classes is that we try to embrace and provide opportunity for all of our people representing. It's about how we represent.
Absolutely. We should be
um,
supporting each other.
Yeah, and I think that was one, again, that was something else that even came up when we were talking, kind of coming out of the pandemic, with some of our other masterclass guests. This whole idea, it was the same conversation with Michael Holding, as an international world-renowned cricketer, talking about Caribbean and how we show up, and being able to work as a team. But at the
Yeah.
same time, hearing that from Marla Dukaran as an economist now on the other side, saying the same thing, and then hearing you, again talk about this, it feels like it's the message that keeps getting missed. And earlier we had a comment, where it spoke about the fact that perhaps our region is intimidated because of our size. We feel like we're small. Some of us don't even show up on international maps. So, maybe the feeling that we're so small, we have no impact. Have you ever come up with that, come across that, hit that as a wall?
Yeah, I think that, obviously what happens frequently is that you don't feel like you're part of the club. And it's just a lot of self-talk. And, in most cases, you are more qualified than someone who has that, is part of a larger economy or whatever. And you just have to believe in yourself. I mean, it sounds so cliche, it really does, but it's so true. Like, you have to know how amazing you are. And if you grew up in the Caribbean and you went to a Caribbean school, you already have a superior education.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason for you to feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of building on what we have as and then the sense of pride that allows us to say, yeah, I have a place here. I have a right at the table.
Yeah.
Now, you, interestingly enough, got an award through PAHO, I believe. I had mentioned it earlier, when you were covering mental health and psychosocial support during COVID. So I'm going to turn to that, because I feel like that's an interesting one. We talk food, we talk agriculture, now we're talking mental health coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So talk me through that.
Okay. Well, obviously, as a journalist, I'm going to cover issues that are pertinent and pressing. And as I'm sure all of us have heard, along with this health crisis that we're going through, we're also facing a mental health pandemic, where so many people with vulnerabilities around mental health, things got so much worse during this
Mm-hmm.
time. And
Yeah.
as a mother, the article that I won the prize for actually was about teenagers, and I have 3 teenagers. And so this
Mm-hmm.
really hit home. Um, it's a subject that's really close to my heart, and I definitely followed it quite extensively in Cayman, because it is a big issue in Cayman. It's quite vocalized, and um, it was something that I've been, again, really passionate about. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really something that would have almost felt irresponsible of me not to cover.
Okay. And, it's interesting because that's going to become a bigger and bigger conversation. I don't feel like we've even scratched the surface where that is concerned. As you said, it is a mental health pandemic, and we're seeing it play out more and more and more in our Caribbean communities. We had a very interesting conversation with Julie Mango, who was TikTok, Instagram star, about mental health and her journey. And I feel like I always have to echo this, that we in the Caribbean should not be afraid to have the conversation about mental health. regardless of the stigma. You know, in Barbados, people would talk about Black Rock, and
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
geez.
yeah, you know, for those of you who are not from Barbados, you know, that's where the mental institution is housed. That's the area where the mental institution is housed. So there's this huge stigma, and a lot of us suffering in silence. And I also love that you focused on our young people.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. I think something really important, it kind of ties into something really important about showing up, is
Mm-hmm,
that you cannot be afraid to be vulnerable,
mm-hmm,
because it is oftentimes your deepest, most powerful vulnerability that makes you blow up in a positive way. It's because it's
mm-hmm,
that's what makes you authentic. There's a reason that something makes you vulnerable, and your vulnerability is usually also your strength. And
mm-hmm,
mental health issues are something that I'm passionate about. I've suffered with depression in the past, and actually, my eldest daughter has. I'm so proud of her for this, because she has suffered with depression, and she's an excellent writer, and she has written about 3 articles about it and had them
oh wow.
published. Yeah,
Oh wow.
and
So go ahead. Sorry.
no, I'm just saying, like, that is her power.
Yes.
She's
And I
owned
was
it.
also going to say that it's passed down in terms of the writing,
Mm-hmm.
the passion for writing from mom to daughter. I love that, and the fact that she has found that as an avenue for her voice. That's how she can express. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, she was
Um,
just a finalist in the Cayman Young Writers competition that they just had.
ooh,
Yay!
well done, proud mama, proud mama.
I had to throw that in there.
So we have some other questions for you. Going back to this idea that agriculture not quite too as not very sexy in the Caribbean context. We just really have an aversion for it. And the question is, how much does socioeconomic status or class systems in our region
Mhm.
factor into how we react to climate change and to food security? So, you know, what are your thoughts on that, or you know, our class system, and how we see ourselves from a socioeconomic perspective?
Um, so I would say, from the climate change perspective, actually, that is across the board, something that people don't have a lot of knowledge about,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's getting kind of trendy now. I actually gave a presentation for another conference a few weeks ago. And before I did that, I had to look at some numbers from the region on interest in newspaper articles to do with climate change.
Mm.
And it the interest was so low. I mean, health issues were near the top, but because it was a climate change and health conference. And so the health issues, there was so much interest and very little interest to do with climate change. And that was across the board. Um, so it's definitely an area that we need to educate people more. And then the question was food security.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to venture to say that also there's not enough knowledge around that as well. I think people
Mm-hmm.
go from their gut. And I think, like, what we're saying, that there's this historical aversion to agriculture because of our history with it. But then there are some countries within the region that you see breaking away from that. And definitely Jamaica is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Jamaica is doing a lot of great things with agriculture.
Mm-hmm. And you know, food security, I don't think I heard that term as much as I did in the last year and a half, when a lot of us saw what was happening in supermarkets, in particular in countries or islands where we import a lot. And suddenly that was the buzzword, the buzz term, that you've been hearing. But to your point, do we really understand what that looks like and mean for the Caribbean? You know?
Yeah, I think people don't, because people will say, well, I go into the supermarket and there's plenty of food on the shelves.
Mm,
I eat before I go to bed at night, or I wake up in the morning and I eat. So I'm not food insecure. But really, are you or are you not? Because there's food insecurity is a multifaceted thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about, I like to compare it to being in a relationship. Like if you've, we're all adults here, so I'm sure we've all been in bad relationships at some point or another. What
Mm-hmm.
you're most afraid of in a bad relationship, an insecure relationship, is that that person could leave at any time, right? And that's the same thing about food insecurity. You don't have a locked in, consistent, predictable, no matter what's going to happen, I'm going to have access to this. And when 80% of your food comes from another country and borders get shut down, a lot of things aren't going to come through to you. And we may not have seen that on a massive scale during the pandemic, but there were a lot of things that didn't come in that people did not notice. There were certain brands that were just not coming in anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many people that were struggling because they lost access to their income. And that's another form of food insecurity. Or people suddenly were just living off of like 3 staples and completely malnourished. And that's another form of food insecurity.
Mm. And I think that we have not yet scratched the surface as a region or even within our own islands to talk about that.
Yeah.
And to talk, because that then ties into how do you then support your sector that could in some way help you through some of the shortages that you find. Because when I talk with I have a sister who loves talking with farmers, and let me tell you, she tracks the supermarkets. If it's a oomph of a difference, she notices. But one of the hurtful things in the Caribbean is that we have spent so much time investing in importing that we have in effect kill our agricultural in that industry. We make it very difficult for our local farmers through underpricing and and then giving them a glut because we are still importing what they're producing. So in a sense, it's something where we ourselves are, our own worst enemy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually part of my mission, is to instill a pride and a desire to eat our own local foods.
Mm-hmm. And we have a comment here too that when the ports were closed and we could no longer import goods, people were starting to see there are certain things, but also that food security is a widely discussed topic around hurricane season as well. Because again,
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, of course, our food security is impacted in general by climate change issues.
yeah. So I love some more comments coming through. We've got ACB here and she says there needs to be more self-belief about what we have to offer in the region. We're unique in many ways, whether it's culturally, intellectually, and creatively. So we should be using this to our advantage. I agree with that. But then she posed a question: without a universal platform for sharing information about the Caribbean, you know, they're journalists like yourselves, who in effect become our platform. So the question is, who are some other journalists that we can follow and support? So, in the same way we should be following and supporting you in terms of what you are doing for our region. Are there any other recommendations of who we should also be supporting?
Katrina Marshall is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
She's Bajan. She lives in the UK. She is just amazing. And she writes for a number of large platforms as well. And, you don't have to write for a large platform to be amazing, right? I just mentioned, Georgina, these people, and oftentimes young people who have innovative ideas and are putting them out there in blogs. Follow people's blogs. There's so many bloggers out there, and I'm not familiar with all of them. I love Katrina because she and I are friends, and we read each other's stuff, and And she's another one who will promote her colleagues. And we should be promoting and sharing each other's material. Gosh, there's somebody from Haiti who's fantastic, who just reads so much of what she writes, and I can't remember her name. It stumped me for now, but I
No
mean,
worries. No worries.
you know who else is great? Ron Johnson is great. He's fantastic. He is actually a marketing person, and his ideas are just so cool. And he just released a book.
Okay.
And he's from Barbados. Oh goodness, just there's so many great people out there.
Okay.
And not everybody has the same size platform, but a platform is not what makes you. You are what make your platform. So you could have like a blog and be the best thing out there. So do never let your platform define you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So a couple of names there. Sharon said she met Ron on a few occasions, and um, so Ron Johnson, Katrina Marshall, and if you ever remember the name from Haiti, by all means share it with us.
Yeah. Oh my
But
goodness. Just
that's how.
drawing a blank right now.
No, that's okay. That's how it is. But that was a great question, and I loved those recommendations. Definitely for me to check some of these names out as well. And it's interesting too, with the comments coming through, that they said there's a mention here again. If we talk about food security, we have to speak about manufacturing, and that's coming through from Powder Monkey again. So, and then we have another comment agreeing to that we should be looking at manufacturing. So, um,
Yes.
have you ever delved into that topic of manufacturing?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's so important because oftentimes what we will do is we will sell the raw material and not realizing the value of that raw material. And we will sell it to like Europe, and they will take it. The best example I have is our cocoa. And Trinidad has like the best cocoa in the world. And I mean, now like they're making a lot of chocolate, and it's fantastic. It's Trinitario, and it's beans, and it's like the highest possible quality. And we need to be exploring value added manufacturing absolutely a lot more. Jamaica's another one that they're building that out more. And even in Barbados, we're doing a better job. I mean, like obviously we have our like cottage industries, and then we have our Carmetas, which is like our vegan foods, which is fantastic. So I mean, it's definitely growing. It's definitely growing, and there's a huge market for it, especially in the diaspora.
Okay. And it's interesting too, because we should also be talking about within the Caribbean region, when you have this manufacturing taking place and all these great products of, in Cayman getting Barbados products, and vice versa. If something is produced here, having access to that in Guyana, having access to that in Antigua, having access to that in some other islands. But it almost seems to work against us too, because of the cost of shipping, and all of these things that just seem to complicate even how, as a region, we could support ourselves.
Yep. Yeah. What was it? I think I'm trying to remember what she was talking about, but Mia was giving a speech the other day, and she said, we've managed to find the solution for male baldness, but we can't solve such a simple problem. So yeah, like why can't we solve that problem, this integration issue where we get products from around the region? It just seems almost ridiculous.
Yeah, it's true. And then when we get them, it's also very expensive sometimes. And
Yeah.
people are like, well, I'm going to pay for the cheaper product that comes from somewhere else. It really is hard. So Sharon says CARICOM tries to get a region to do this, but you are correct. The cost associated with it is the challenge. And it almost kind of makes you wonder when we will get to that point where these are some of the issues that we can navigate as a region.
Yeah.
Be able to offer the beauty of our goods.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to find a way to create economies of scale within our countries so
Mhm.
that we can also bring the cost down for consumers.
Okay. Well,
So that's
I'm loving the questions, loving the comments. Thank you all so much. There's a question in a comment here that we're seeing experimentation with things like sweet potato flour, cassava flour, breadfruit flour. So there are people who are becoming very innovative. And then there's another comment here that when the ports allow a backup of ships that bring in the goods for people, there's the extra cost to the consumers, and then you have the destruction of crops, etc. Dry season and all of these things that impact our farmers to be able to also produce. So that's where they're saying food is going to be scarce. When you look at
yeah.
all of these components together, food is going to be scarce. But I guess it goes back to education.
Yeah, and technology is key too.
Mm,
We need to really invest in technology and learn from the success stories of other islands. So,
right.
I mean, Jamaica has been doing a decent job, and there are lessons that we can learn because during COVID, I would say actually we did that is agriculture was actually one of our success stories throughout the region.
Mm,
Um, I know Barbados ramped up agriculture. Jamaica actually, we did better than the States because they were throwing so much stuff away. They
mhm,
had this perfect like partnership going on in Jamaica between the government, the farmers, and the consumers, and they
mhm.
called it was a campaign called "Say Yes to Fresh,"
Okay.
and listen, their minister of agriculture was going out in the streets selling produce.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
The, they created all of these markets that weren't there before. And I mean, it was just, and he was then going and taking certain types of produce. Like apparently they had this massive glut of tomatoes, and
Mhm,
he went to True Juice, which is one of their juice manufacturers, and he got them to create a new line of juice so they could absorb all of these extra tomatoes that were being produced because they had lost tourism, which usually consumed those
mm.
tomatoes. Like that,
I
that's a great lesson to learn.
and I think that and that one speaks to me as well because last year I know in Cayman we had a glut when it came to mangoes, but
Oh my
it
gosh, remember
wasn't
that?
yeah, but here's the thing: it wasn't a success story that you just talked about, where they could take
Right.
that and create something. It broke my heart to hear the amount of mangoes that people ended up losing and destroying and throwing away because there wasn't that forethought of how do we use that, reuse that, save that, so there's no loss. And there's a comment here: we need a Caribbean food bank.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Caribbean Food Bank. And then the incentives to support small businesses isn't just with the production, but it's also packaging and promotion. That is a good point as well,
Hmm.
because it can be all of those things can add to the cost for us to be able to truly produce and produce of a quality to serve our region. Well, time is flying. We only have a few minutes left, believe it or not. I'm loving all the comments, loving all the questions. So if you have any last comments and questions, this is your time now to put them into the chat. But I have one for you
Okay.
um, where I want to ask you what's next. What's next for you, Miss Daphne Ewing-Chow? What is next on the agenda?
Uh, I really want to continue to get my fingers into this food thing. I think that is
Mm,
just a massive issue for us. I I want to take it deeper. I want to take it further. I've been exploring the idea of maybe starting something, some kind of not for profit, but definitely going to stay in this area. This is definitely my love. And
mhm,
definitely, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life is work around Caribbean foods and Caribbean food systems.
mhm.
This, I don't think this problem is going to be gone in my lifetime. So
Yeah.
it will be more of this for sure. And by the
Okay.
way, in terms of the audience, like I'm always interested in telling interesting stories. So if you know of an interesting food story, please don't hesitate to email me. And I'm very excited to tell our stories.
Okay. Well, there you have it. That's a beautiful invitation to be able to tell your, if you know interesting stories and you want to tell Miss Daphne, tell that story, by all means, reach out to her. I should get you to maybe give me your information and we can put it in the chat if, you
Okay.
want people to email you. And I'm
Yep, sure.
also sharing for those of you who are watching, if you're watching for the first time for Caribbean Masterclasses, don't be afraid to subscribe. We have a lot more great content that comes out throughout the year. And if you're following on the YouTube channel, you can also rewatch this episode because I find that I love to rewatch these episodes because then I get even more gems and nuggets. I was like, wait a minute, that's what we chatted about. Whoa, this is so cool. But you can also see past master classes. I've referenced a few already, but you can watch those episodes as well, and continue to push for great Caribbean content. Let me know as well, if there are other people that you'd love to hear their story. I think it's very important for us to be able to share in your journey. And I mean, if I can just, summarize it's all about you following your passion and being authentic in how you show up. And because you've done that, you've been able to show up for us as a region. Um, and I want to encourage everybody to consider that. That was the theme of today's masterclass, how we show up. So for those of us who have platforms, Issy B is on, and she's beautiful for fashion, for example, and her work in fashion, etc. And we've had so many other kind of persons in this chat who are doing great things in your field. So by all means, I see Kim and Cabana here. I know they've been doing some wonderful things
And
with
he used the mangoes last year.
yes, yes, yes. Farm to table. We've got Powder Monkey Gourmet Treats on as well. Again, another small business in Cayman doing great things. And you mentioned we had Georgina Calendar, so definitely check out. She did put her information so we can check out what she's doing. And we got some other journalists, Katrina Marshall, Ron Johnson. I'm encouraging you all to take a look and see what they are doing.
Another
Um,
one actually is Christina Hunt, by the way. She's in marketing as well. And I feel like you need to pick what's like really unique and special about you and just put it on display. And Christina is an introvert, and
mhm.
her thing is devoted to selling yourself when you're an introvert. And
Ooh,
everything she writes is about being an introvert and succeeding as an introvert. And I thought it was pretty cool. It's a
okay.
cool
Okay.
angle.
Well, there's an interesting question that just jumped up, even though we've only got 3 minutes to go, and it is this question: why can't each Caribbean country plant food in Guyana? Now, that is an idea I have never, I've kind of heard um, mentioned before. I am very fascinated by that because they talk about Honduras, planting in Honduras and then selling in other islands. So why not
Yeah.
in
And
Guyana?
I think there was, and this was just before I moved away from Barbados, but I know there was some talk of doing that in Suriname, right?
Mm,
Where we were going to grow crops on Surinamese land. So, I mean, I honestly, I haven't explored that topic, so I can't even speak intelligently to it. But I mean, I've been hearing about different countries doing that.
well, that's something that's actually quite fascinating to me because I didn't even think. I mean, I didn't even hear about Suriname either as an option. Guyana is an option. I mean, here again, this is how we leverage within the region. So thanks again. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I love your
Yeah, thank
passion
you.
and the excitement that you bring every time we chat. Hopefully, we will be able to do some other things with you in the new year. So, all my
Yeah.
Caribbean masterclassers, please stay tuned. Never know what's coming up. Never know what's coming up. Um, and again, all the guests, thank you again for all of your comments. They're still coming. So when you get a chance, Daphne, you're going to have to read them. The comments
Okay.
themselves is another segment of
Oh my
the
goodness, I can't wait to read
practice.
them.
But we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you
And
so much.
have a wonderful evening. And to everybody who's been with us, thank you again.
Thanks. Have a great night, everybody.